Welcome to the barn. My name is Joanne Knight, and we're going to do a barn buddy today on borders and what happens when they're not perfectly straight. And I'm just going to be demoing the top border for you, but the same thing applies to the bottom as well as the sides. One of my favorite movies is Murphy's Romance with James Garner and Sally Field, and in that movie James Garner tells Sally Field, "Take another tack, Emma." And sometimes that's what we have to do with borders where the quilt is not quite as straight as it needs to be. So let me demo that a little bit for you and point out a couple of things on how Creative Studio sets up a border corner. I have two patterns chosen here. I'm going to left click on the corner. These two are by Christy Dillon. I'm going to hold down my control key and left click on the repeat, and then I'm going to left click on border corner because I need to mark the points on this dialog box and enter that first on my little quilt. And I have a little wall hanging here that I made, so it's okay if it turns out crooked because I did it. So you want to notice that the first point that you're going to left click is the upper left outer corner. So let me do that with the machine head. And it's my custom to use my hopping foot to click 1/4 inch inside. So I'm going to go down to the belly bar, and I always go all the way to the belly bar. Crosshairs do not show up until you get down to that point. That gives me my outside border. So now I'm going to click the inside. And for the inside, I'm clicking directly on that seam. Now when I click this last point, Creative Studio is going to automatically put in those corners and that border, the repeats and the border and the corner. So you can see that that goes in really well. The point that I'm making here is, remember where we clicked? The upper left and then the upper right. So Creative Studio is assuming that this quilt is perfectly straight all the way across this top and that it is perfectly straight on this inside border seam, and we all know that that's not always the case. So in this instance, I'm going to take a different tack because I want to be able to account for the crooked quilt and the crooked border. I can do stitch in the ditch on this inside border seam to try to straighten it out as much as possible, but sometimes that doesn't even help me. What I can do, if I want Creative Studio to do the math for me and set up this border for me as far as how many repeats I need, I can let Creative Studio do this part and set up the boundary, and then I can hit my delete key because you see this boundary's red. In the border corner quilt group, I can hit my delete key and I can delete those two, and I can go back and click the border out and make as many clicks as I want to. So that's one of the options that we have. Let Creative Studio set it up for you and then go back and click out the exact boundary that you have. So let's do that. And with that, I don't have to click them separately. So let's go to the boundary tool. I'm still in that border corner group. I can start wherever I want to. Now you can see how that border actually is. I am not the piecing queen, so this is really interesting over here on this side. So this shows you that that border is not exactly as straight as it needs to be. So this is one of the things that you can do. Delete those boundaries. Once Creative Studio has set it up for you, go ahead and delete those and then click out the border that you need to, the boundary that you need to, and your patterns are set in there, and you can select them and adjust them however you feel like you want to adjust them. The other thing that you can do is click out your boundaries the way that they are supposed to be, set your corners in, and I would probably make this corner just a little bit bigger, and I would probably bring this one up a little bit because I want it to be on a 45 line with that corner. Understand that when you adjust these corners, you need to remember that when you get to the bottom of the quilt, because Creative Studio does not understand that I manually adjusted these corners. What I'm going to do now is I've got my corners placed. I can either quilt these corners or I can leave these corners on the computer screen, and I'm going to go to my quilt and I am going to click out using the head of my machine. I'm going to click out this line right here and use apply, and I can make as many clicks as I want to. So I've got to go to point line. I'm going to select my point to point. I'm going to use my hopping foot to be a 1/4 inch off of my inside seam. And because I'm using my hopping foot and my hopping foot is riding right along that line, I'm going to be able to click as many clicks as I need to click along that quilt. Hit stop, hit shift and exit, and I'm going to move my crosshairs out of the way so that you can see it. Now what I have is a line that goes from the left corner to the right corner. I'm going to select that line. I'm going to select my border, and I'm going to tell Creative Studio to apply. And what that's going to do is apply that pattern to this line, which is following my seam line. That's my little paintbrush over here. Left click. And Creative Studio is going to symmetrically put those patterns in there. Well, I don't like those at all, so I'm going to select them and delete them. I can measure and know what height this border is, and it's only 4 inches, and you can see that my pattern is 6 inches. So Creative Studio is trying to give me the 6 inches of the pattern, and it's trying to do what I ask it to. So I'm going to say, nah, give me about 375 on that height. Select my pattern, left click on my paintbrush. There you go. Better. It is trying to put them symmetrically in there. I need to delete this line because that's a sewable pattern and it will sew that line. So I'm going to hit delete because it's selected. I'm going to select these patterns depending on how crooked this border is. I'm just going to move these in and start there. Scroll in really close. Take this one. Go to my nodes. You see that little pink node right there? Turn my E on my keyboard and end snap it. I didn't have to divide it. Nodes is not just for dividing. It's also for end snapping. So I'm going to snap this one. Click off of that. Thank you. They're not in the right sewing order, but that's a simple matter of taking this one, going right over here to my order join and left click, and now they will sew continuously. Depending on whether I want this 1/4 inch or not here, I can select them, go back to my F9 anchors, go right, pull it right down here like this, which would suit me better. If I have a really crooked seam, I don't want to come off of it a 1/4 inch. I want that to be as close to that seam line as possible to try to hold that down. This one is a little bit tall. I can pull him down. He's still going to stay connected. Snap this one back by using my nodes because I'm AAA. Y'all know that about me. I am so AAA. Select this one, adjust it. I would then go back and select my order join again to make sure that I haven't missed anything, and now I can sew those patterns. So there's several different ways that you can do this and be able to accomplish the same thing. You can let Creative Studio do the border corner for you. Then you can delete the boundary that you clicked for border corner feature, click in your own boundary and be able to adjust your patterns, or you can start by clicking out your own boundary and put your corners in and then use apply with point-to-point line following that seam line on that quilt. That's the wonderful thing about Creative Studio, is it will do what we need it to do to be able to make our customers' quilts look as good as they can look. I really appreciate you coming to the barn and spending a little bit of time playing Statler with me.